I'm Billy Mack. Welcome to my garage. So what we have planned today, guys, is we're gonna get some assembly done on the block. We are going to at least get the crank in today. And if that goes by quick, we will continue on to put the pistons and rods in. But as of right now, the focus is getting the bearings in, crank, and then the mains set in place. So you guys are gonna follow along and see how I do it. So here's your main bearings, sorry. We have some top and then we have some bottom, 4 of each. So we're gonna set these in the block first, get them all set up. Then we're gonna come clean up the caps and throw the bearings in the caps. And then I just finished cleaning up this crank a little bit. It was getting a little bit of, a little bit of rust on it from sitting a few days, but we'll throw that in as well. So this is how the main bearings are going to sit in place. Remember, we have 4 of these smaller ones. Pretty hard to mess that up. They fit in place. And then we have the center. These ones are larger, the thrust bearings, they are in there to keep the crank from moving around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean off these bearings, a little bit of oil on the bottom, set them in place, and then we run some assembly lube. So again, just adding a little bit of oil so no corrosion happens, a very little bit. Clean the bearings off, add a little bit of oil as well, set them in place, click them in place. Same thing goes for the center. Light little cleaning. Not that they're dirty, they're brand new, they came out of the package. But there is a little bit of dust on them. So let's just make sure we cross all our T's and dot all our I's. Again, this can only go in one way. There's a little tab and a little cutout here, and these won't interlock on any other side of the block. It only goes one way. Last one. A little bit of oil. Some oil on your bearing. Again, tab only goes in one way. Beautiful. Now that they're in there, we will wipe them off because we're going to use assembly lube just to wipe down the oil a little bit. Next step, we'll throw the crank in. So this is the assembly lube, bearing guard, whatever they call it. The key to this stuff is don't be afraid of it. And the warmer the better. Now some people use oil. I assume that's fine. But for a couple bucks for this assembly lube, we'll use this. It is good and sticky. But the slimier that is, the less problems of burning out a bearing when you first start the engine. Time to set the crank in. Beautiful. You can see the assembly lube is now transferring itself onto the crank. Here's the end caps. I am reusing the inner bolts and I'm replacing the side bolts. So I did clean this off. I'm gonna go blow it out with the air and then we're gonna replace the bearings. So again, we're pulling the bearing off. We're gonna give it a good clean in there. This bearing's going away and we will put a brand new bearing on. Okay, so the end cap is cleaned. We're gonna put a little bit of oil down again in the middle, right in here. And these, just so you guys know, these here all go into place. On GMs, they have markings on them. I don't know if I can show you that marking, if it'll zoom in. But this one's 5, so this one's the one that's furthest back. All right, so we're tossing a little bit of oil just to keep it from getting rusty. Same thing as before, your bearings, I suggest cleaning them off a bit, dabbing a little bit of oil on those as well, and then we'll set them in place. Same as the other bearings, these can really only go one way. Beauty. Do a little clean. That's the first one. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna add some of our assembly lube. Wipe down the sides. So you'll see these lips. It's tapered out like that. That faces inwards on the engine. Let's go over and find out. All right, so since this is the last, these tapered ends are pointing inwards. We're gonna set this in very, very gentle. We'll tap it a little bit just to make sure once we get going. But as for now, looks pretty good. So since I'm reusing the bolts, from my research, using these a couple times is just as good as the first time. Many people have had great luck, so we're gonna do the same. First thing, I'm gonna clean them. We're gonna add a little bit of oil, set them in place. Now that these bolts are all cleaned, we're gonna run a little bit of oil on the threads and a little up at the head. And then we're gonna go slide them in, making sure we do not damage them. All right, so this is the placement of the bolts. 13s are the inner, and the 15 mil stud are for the outside. So here we are with end cap number 2. The end caps have their bearings in them. They're all cleaned up. Now time to place them in the engine. Start with a little bit of assembly lube, just a dot. We don't need much. Let's go over and toss this end cap on. So as you can see, there is like a swoop out here on the side. You see it? One side's flat, one side swoops out. Well, the swoop out goes backwards. So we'll set this in nice and delicate. Remember, this one is number 4, so it comes near the back. Rubber mallet or your plastic. Lightly tap it in place. Come back over, grab your bolts. Remember, we're gonna throw a little bit of oil on the threads and a little around the head, and then slip them in place. So again, I'm only putting these ones in just to set them in place. Let's get the end caps in, get the centers in place, then we'll go inside. I have brand new side bolts.
It seems like the way to live. Who said I should be a big shot? Who said I should take it, take off? I gotta rest. I'm feeling so good in me.
So I'm gonna run in, get the side bolts. We'll set those in place. And then we'll get ready to torque them down. Beautiful GM side bolts. If you're reusing bolts, the factory ones have like a RTD on the side to keep leaks from happening. These are 10 mil bolt. Let's go toss them in. So they just come in on the side, just like so.
I know it, but I misunderstood.
5 on one side and 5 on the other.
Feeling like that, well, they say it's so loud.
So now they're all in. So what we're going to do first, we're going to torque down the end caps to about 40 pounds. What that does is it's gonna push the bearings, seat them in place. Then we're gonna loosen them up to about 4 or 5 pounds-feet of torque. So here we go. When we're torquing these, remember, we start in the middle and work our way out.
But I gotta tell ya, gotta live and let die. I gotta rest, I don't know I could. Nothing to reach and I feel like I should. Feeling like that, well, they say it's so loud.
So now what we do, we loosen it all back up. So now we know that the bearings are seated. We're gonna set our torque wrench to about 16 foot-pounds. Same thing, circle pattern.
What I had to do, this is enough for me. Never meant to be a winner, never meant to be a quitter. But this is how it was satisfaction. Chip thrills, chip tricks.
So 16 foot-pounds isn't a whole lot. All right, so next step, after we get these initially torqued down to 16 foot-pounds, we're gonna run the angle gauge. It's the same torque pattern we just used. $80.
The way to live. Who said I should be a big shot? Who said I should take it tick-tock? I gotta rest. I'm feeling so good. In me, I know it, but I'm misunderstood. A feeling like that, well, they say it's a lie, but I gotta tell ya, gotta live and let die. I gotta rest, 'cause I've done all I could.
All right, all the inners are torqued. Now we're gonna head out to the outer and get those torqued. So remember, inner bolts 16, then to about 80 degrees on the angle gauge. Now we're gonna do the outer bolts, which are 15 mil. We're gonna do those as well to 16 foot-pounds, and then to about 51 to 53 degrees, roughly, give or take.
And nothing of reach, and I don't feel like I should. A feeling like that, well, they say it's a lie, but I gotta tell ya, gotta live and let die. Who said I should be a big shot? Who said I should take a tick-tock?
Okay, so all of the center ones are done. Now it's time to run the sides. The sides are pretty easy, 18 foot-pounds, unless you're using the RTD, which would be 19, I believe. Switch to the other side. So that is that, spinning freely. So what I'm going to do now that everything is in place, you can see just from today, I'm gonna do a quick wipe down of the crank and then throw some oil in there to lubricate it up. And then we're gonna close it all back over and get ready to put the rings on the pistons.
Said I should be a big shot. Said I should be.
Hi.
Hi.
All right, so we're gonna do the Olivia test. If Olivia can turn the crank, if she can turn the crank, that means we did a good job. If she can't turn it, we're gonna have to put a Ford motor into it. Are you ready?
This is a Ford Mustang.
It's a Ford Mustang.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So everything's all oiled up.
And my hands.
We're gonna have some supper. We'll turn this around. And then I think tonight what we'll do is I'm going to get my little helper here, maybe, if she wants to come out,
Yeah.
to toss some rings on the pistons. So it's supper time for now. We will be back. So far, so good. Crank is in. End caps are on. Everything's torqued down to spec. Olivia's in the garage. It's not too cold in here. It's actually warm in here.
It's actually really warm.
It's actually
Just
warm
leave
in
that
here.
thing in.
Yeah. So next, flip this around, get the rings in. Stay tuned. And here we go. What are we working on?
We're working on the motor with these.
This is a piston,
A piston.
and we're gonna put the rings on.
Yeah! I don't know
Yeah.
what he's talking
So first up is the oil rings.
about. Okay.
They go down on the bottom. Pretty simple.
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
If you don't know where the rings are, right here. Can I take it out?
You gotta open the bag first.
It's already open.
Oh my goodness. Look at that.
So it kind of looks like,
And you have to be very careful with these because they can bend real easy.
and it's kind of like a slinky.
Yeah. So let's see what we got. We have piston number 1. We just put the first of the bottom of the oil rings on.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Now look at these rings. They're like curly hair.
Ooh.
Look at that. Yay.
They look so fun.
Yeah, they are fun.
How long have we been working on this engine?
We've been working on the engine for a long time. So the oil rings are in the ring land. All set up.
Okay.
Now on to the next set of rings.
Oh,
Okay, time to put the bottom ring on.
bottom ring on.
So we're going to use our ring pliers.
I thought you said that those can break easily.
Slides on. Not there, but there. Now we'll wipe this one down. Ring tool,
Ring tool,
ring pliers,
ring pliers,
separate,
separate,
place on,
place on,
and away we go.
and away we go.
What do you think?
Let me see.
Looks pretty good, eh?
Looks pretty good. Just gotta push that part in a little more.
Well, it pushes it in when we put it in the motor.
Ooh.
So you know what this means?
Yeah.
Number 1 is done. Now, we're gonna offset the rings, and I'll show you that whenever we go to place them in because the rings are pretty loose here now, so. Okay, so here we go. Piston number 2. Oil ring first. Bottom ring. With the oils. And now toss on the top ring. Take our bottom ring first, spread it apart with the ring pliers. Second ring, top ring. So I forgot to say, on the bottom ring, remember, there's a little dimple on the ring, and that faces upwards. Piston number 2 is now ready.
A big shop. Said I should be 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 a big shop. Said I should.
All right, there you have it. All the rings are on. We will align them up. They're not going to be facing each other. I'll get into that later. But for now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get these rod bearings in. Okay, so the rod bearings. Pretty simple. Make sure that your machine shop does all the measurements and whatnot on your crank. Same as the mains. Make sure that they're the ones that does the ordering for you. Just so they can measure your crank and they'll select the right bearings for the job. So here's the piston and rod, obviously pretty simple. And there's the bearing that we're gonna take out. So what happens now? Well, I'm gonna pull out this rod bearing. Do a little cleaning. Making sure everything's in tip-top condition. Is it a little overkill with the cleaning? Well, maybe, but I figure every time I do something, I might as well clean that item again. So these are the stock rod bearings. I don't know if you can see. There's a little bit of scuffage in them. Nothing too serious. Probably would have been completely fine using them again. But for a few bucks, why not replace them, right? All right, so same situation before. Tossing some oil. A little bit of oil on the end of the one's in place. Two's in place. So again, these only go on one way. That is not it. Rod number 1 bearing is done. 7 more to go. And there you have it. Rings are on, crank is in, bearings are on the rods. Block, I just oiled up, gonna cover it up, and that's it for now. That book over there helped me a lot, but I probably could have figured it out minus the torque specs on how to rip a block apart and whatnot. But that book is amazing. Just one sec. So if anybody plans on building an LS motor, that's the book to get. So we're gonna leave it at that.
Yes.
I'm Billy Mack, and this is
Olivia Mack.
And welcome to our
garage.